here.
Okay. I thought I might ask folks, since we have a pretty wide range of organizations, firms, and areas across the states, if folks want to put into the chat, if it's not obvious in your name, your organization or your firm, and where you're joining from, go ahead and put that into the chat. Give it one more minute and start. We have folks joining from a couple of different time zones, so it's possible that people are just either finishing their lunch or finishing a morning meeting. Just a reminder to everyone to mute so that we can minimize background noise. Okay, I'm gonna start by welcoming everyone on behalf of the New Jersey Statewide Dam Removal Partnership, which I'll just refer to as the partnership going forward. The partnership is a collaboration of nonprofits and government agencies that seeks to advance the removal of antiquated, dangerous, or ecologically detrimental dams. Its members meet quarterly to discuss beneficial dam removal projects and to exchange information regarding policy, regulatory issues, funding, and the practical considerations of dam removal. The partnership also provides information to the public about dams and dam removal and how they may affect their communities and their lives. Our dam removal partnership website is at njdams.org. I would also like to let folks know that there will be 2 polls during this webinar. We're trying to collect information about what sort of things, what skill sets people would like to build, what kind of information people need. And I'll be sharing that with our partner, American Rivers, so that we can better understand what sort of information is needed and where. So you'll see a couple of the questions we'll ask you for your region, so that we can figure out if there are different gaps in different places. Okay, so with that, I'm going to go ahead and present on preparing a budget for your dam removal project. Oh, first let me just say that on that njdams.org site, there are already 8 information sessions. This one will be added to that, and coming in early 2022, we'll be adding an information session on monitoring a dam removal. If you've joined, then I'll use the email from today to contact you about future information sessions, unless you ask me not to. Okay, the session outline for today, I'll present first, and I'll talk about how we get that early estimate of costs and the different methods we use to put an early budget together. And then going a little bit deeper, our partners from U.S. Fish and Wildlife, who I'll introduce before they speak, will talk about a little bit deeper on estimating those costs and how to avoid some of the pitfalls that will lead you to a budget that isn't accurate or isn't thorough, and present some case studies. And then our third presenter will talk about developing a budget using the NRCS cost share method, and how we go about putting together a budget when we have different funding sources who may need to see it in different ways. So no matter who the dam owner is, whether it's a private owner, it could be city, county, state, a business entity, the first thing that anyone is going to ask when you propose removal of a dam, or when they come to you and ask to help for removal of the dam, is how much will this cost? And of course, every partner and the owner needs to know the answer to that question. First, I'll start by saying that there are two types of budgets. There's the preliminary budget, which I'll focus on. It can also be called preliminary cost analysis, cost opinion, cost estimate. And as we step through these early discussions, trying to figure out what exactly our budget is going to look like, one of the most common things that we do is turn to other similar recent dam removals that are local to the one we're working on and try to get a look or talk to our partners about that project budget. It's important to know that, and you kind of have to get comfortable with the fact that you don't really have a final budget until you bid the job, because the professionals who are actually doing the work, and whether it's the engineers or the contractors, they're going to bid based on the current situation, current cost of things. And in the case of the engineer, your specific regulatory environment. So you'll be fairly far along before you get a final budget. There are a few papers, and these two are recent, so I put them up there, of 2016 and 2017, that talk about different ways, different models that would allow you to estimate the cost per foot. I think, like all models, they are useful. However, it's going to really be focused on the stripped down version of a dam removal. So you can get in trouble using these budgets if you rely too heavily upon them. So I think that they are useful in the sense that they will give you kind of the lowball estimate. So I just highlighted the one paper, looks like 30,000 or 22,000, and a couple different models that were run. And then that last one is 24,000. So I just, taking that rough average, I'm going to call it 26,000. If you have a 10-foot dam and you want to say, okay, 26,000 times 10 feet, you can probably feel safe knowing that that's your lowball, that there's no way that you're going to pay less than that. But where you can get in trouble using these estimates is to kind of believe that you're seeing the full picture. What you'll need to do is to pull out those features about your specific dam removal that might bring the cost up, and really explore those issues. And our next presenter will give some examples of those factors that can influence costs and how to avoid underestimating those costs. Be aware that the issues will vary regionally. It depends on the characteristic of rivers, the concentration of infrastructure, and the regulatory environment that you're dealing with. So I realize that up to this point, I seem to have said, you really need an estimate. Here's a way to get an estimate, but don't use this way to get an estimate. So not very helpful. So I'm going to kind of step through a little bit of how exactly we go through that very early estimate. So again, with help from partners, we try to just figure out what line items are going to be in my budget when I look at this particular dam removal. Then I'm going to look to similar recent projects in the region to get the costs that would be associated with those line items. And that is going to get me to a preliminary budget. So we're going to, here's some examples. Do I need a mussel survey on this specific dam? Is it hard to get in? Am I going to have to build an access road, clear an access road? Is it steep? Or maybe, we're going to just pull up right next to the dam. Is there a lot of sediment? Is there nearby infrastructure? These are things that partners and owners can brainstorm together. So if you know that you may have these issues, then you can start to figure out, what is it going to cost me to truck sediment? Is it clean sediment? Very different price than if it is not clean sediment. What is engineering and design going to cost? What do permitting cost on a similar project? So again, we take all of those pieces, working with partners, and that allows us to create a preliminary budget. So if you get this far and you have a preliminary budget that seems to make sense, and the dam owner and partners that you're working with are comfortable with this, saying, okay, you know, that is whatever, $500,000, yeah, I think that we can do that. At that point is when you really need to start to nail down those costs, because once you start to seek funding, you're going to need more than what I've just explained when you're reaching out to funders. At this point, you'll very likely have to hire a consultant who will most likely be an engineer. There are professional estimators out there. They would need to have, you know, a deep expertise in dam removal, and I just don't think you're going to find, you know, a lot of estimators out there that have that. Now, if you're in a federal agency, you may have an in-house estimator that can do that for you. But I think that in general, organizations and agencies are not going to have that kind of expertise in-house. So generally, it means that you are engaging with a consultant who will then take those line items that you've developed in that preliminary way, put that together into a conceptual design that meets the conditions that you want, right? You might need fish passage. You might need to protect some infrastructure, and also overlay the regulatory environment that you're working in. What exactly do I need to do to check all the boxes of my regulators? That's where things like threatened and endangered species may come in, for example. And, you know, once you're working with someone who does dam removal, they'll know things, you know, is this going to be this spot for certain species? So at this point, you're going to wind up with what is, you know, usually called the engineer's opinion of probable cost. And this is enough to use in a grant application. This is solid enough numbers, you know, with meaningful line items that you can feel comfortable making an application with that number. So the last thing that I wanted to do is to just kind of walk you through templates that, you know, contain those line items. I'm not going to go bit by bit. You know, next speaker will talk a little bit more about these line items and what they might mean to you. But this first one just shows engineering tasks, the majority of which would be relevant on most dam removal. So there's not necessarily a lot here that would fall away, but there are things that would, you know, remain that simple line item. There are other ones here that, depending on your specific situation, can wind up having many, many nested tasks underneath, right? If you're on a historic site, if you have T&E species, if you have a dam with a lot of sediment, then, you know, a sediment management plan isn't a 2-paragraph, you know, thing you can issue to a regulator. It's going to be pages and pages and involve engineering design detail with that sediment management plan. So here's in New Jersey anyway, this is our permitting template, our line items for that. And just remember that a particular permit, no matter where you are, may look like it's going to cost you $500, but the preparation and the associated information that often will need to be prepared by your engineers are going to mean that the permitting phase is not simply the total cost of all your permits, but, you know, may go well beyond that. Some, you know, some of them are a little simpler to fill out. Some of them, again, require a whole bunch of technical information before submission. And then last, here is just, you know, something I stole from a recent construction set of line items on a dam removal. So when you look at this, I think you can, you know, see how big of a difference. If you have offsite sediment disposal, for example, look how greatly that can bump up costs. If you're in a place where that is not an issue, you've really jumped down from a high ticket dam removal to probably, you know, more of an intermediate cost for a dam removal. So again, understanding these line items and how they are relevant to your specific dam is important. But also, I think there are a ton of partners out there that, you know, you can reach out to. Certainly, it's, you know, it's what we do all the time. Hey, you just did something where, you know, you had to go down steep slopes, clear, you know, half a mile of trail. What did that run? You know, you can start to get these ballparks from folks. Okay, so we're going to pause for a minute here. Michelle is going to put a link in the chat. I have a short poll. It is going to take you 90 seconds to do this very short poll. But I really want to take this opportunity to collect information, again, not only for the New Jersey partnership, but also I have a conversation scheduling a conversation with American Rivers to help figure out not only what type of information is needed, but where exactly, because they're an organization that does training and information sessions, webinars nationwide. So if we can get that kind of information to them, you know, we'll be able to help them understand where the gaps are. And I think you'll also see the question in there about what sort of, it'll list again for you the information sessions that we have done so far, and you can suggest one based on, you know, what you think is missing, because we're doing our planning for next year. So while you're filling that out, I'm going to stop my share. I'm going to let our next presenter share screens, and I will introduce Kathy Marion of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. I don't know, is Beth presenting with you, or?
It'll just be me today.
Okay, all right. And, but I will give the shout out to Beth Friday from the New Jersey field office for helping for sure in the development. And Kathy is going to talk again about cost estimating, resources you can use, pitfalls that are out there, and give us some case studies.
Thank you, Beth. Can you see my screen okay?
I can.
Okay. Yes, today, so I'm just going to talk about basically general dam removal costs and cost categories, and try to give you a rough eyeball method so that you can use, and you can go out into the field and kind of eyeball the magnitude of dam removal costs that you may be looking at. On this slide, these are just general cost categories that apply to most dam removal projects. Costs can vary widely based on project-specific complexities or by region, as we know. And these categories that I'm mentioning here can be, you know, lumped together or broken down in slightly different fashions, but in some sense, they're what we typically see for a dam removal project. First, we have project administration costs. We do know that dam removals take a lot of administrative time, but despite this being a significant cost for project development and management, administrative costs are often overlooked or simply not calculated. Internally, in discussions I've had with other service members and in discussions with other federal agencies, frankly, we just don't have a great grasp on this, and often our time is not tracked. We also have costs associated with planning and feasibility. So again, as Beth said, that's mapping, H&H studies, geomorph, bathymetry, sediment analysis. This is usually where we're getting a conceptual design and getting an initial cost estimate. We also have costs associated with final design, permitting, and compliance, and costs associated with constructions. A lot of time we break up construction into our actual construction contract. And again, as Beth mentioned, I'm emphasizing here, we don't know really our final project cost until we get that project out to bid. Also for construction, we typically have costs associated with oversight and engineering. Monitoring is another cost category, and we can have multiple types of monitoring. We can be monitoring for success. We can have permit conditions that dictate monitoring. We can have well monitoring. We can have cultural resources monitoring, all sorts of things. Again, I want to encourage everyone to talk with your federal and state partners, NGOs, local engineering and construction firms that are familiar with work in your area to get an idea of cost. I think the biggest pitfall that you might run into when you're starting to ask about costs is that a lot of times full project costs are just kind of unknown. We don't have all the information. You'd be surprised for all these cost categories. For example, administrative costs, again, are often not accounted for, or we may know construction costs, but not feasibility costs, et cetera. So just use caution when you receive cost estimates for similar projects, and just make sure you understand the information that you receive. Okay, so what I'm presenting now is hardly scientific or peer reviewed, but it's a decent way to start just thinking about factors that influence dam removal costs. When I go out to a site, some of the major issues that I think about on that initial visit are, number one, dam size and dam type. Typically, the bigger the dam, the higher the cost. And typically also concrete and other structures of dams are more expensive than earthen removals or timber crimp removals. I look at site access. Can we get equipment into the site? Do we have a reasonable staging area? Because difficult access can mean higher cost. Again, as Beth said, I look at sediment. Is there a lot to deal with or a little? Are there indications that it might be clean or it might be contaminated? Because cost associated with dredging, removal, and disposal of sediment can get quite high. Also look around at the surrounding area for infrastructure. Are there major potential elements to contend with? Are there roads and bridges that may require scour protection? Are there other infrastructure elements like pipelines that may need to be moved or dealt with otherwise? So those are some of the major issues that I look at. Other issues that are in no way small beans, but should also be considered are dam ownership. What do we know? Do we have access? Is it possible that we may have to do some kind of buyout or easement? Species of concern, for example, do we need to do mussel surveys and relocation or any kind of other special measures for imperiled taxa? I mentioned monitoring before. Are we going to be monitoring for success? Is there possible monitoring associated with permit conditions? Do we need to monitor groundwater wells for changes in water table? Adaptive management is also important. Can we predict, are there future conditions that could occur after dam removal where we might have to get into potential future construction actions to remedy those? Cultural resources is important. What is in our area? Do we need to protect or document any historical places? And do we need perhaps to have an archaeologist on site to monitor construction? Looking at disposal and recycling materials. Is there a nearby facility to dispose of dam materials? Do we need to dispose of sediment? If so, where and how? Rock availability. Is there a nearby quarry to source rock? Community resistance. This one's often overlooked, but if there's high community resistance, we might have to spend a lot of time and money and effort on public outreach. Impoundment issues. Do we have a big impoundment? Might we have to do a long drawdown? Or we have to get into using bypass channels or cofferdams. Fish passage, this one might be intuitive, but we've run into it. But will our just dam removal, will our project pass fish? Or do we have a situation where we might have to do dam removal and other special structures to pass fish? So a lot of issues to think about. Again, important to consult with folks in your area to get a handle on both issues and potential costs. So I'm going to go through a series of examples out of New Jersey, but typically when you go out to a site, typically you can at least kind of eyeball it and get an idea. Is it going to be low cost, intermediate cost, or high cost? Down at the bottom here, this is very arbitrary breakdown, but low cost, at least in our region, I'm considering projects that are costing up to $1.5 million, typically involving a small dam. Really none of these major issues, and maybe some of these, few of these other issues that I have listed. Intermediate cost dam, 1.5 to 7 million. So that's gonna be like a medium-sized dam, one or more major issues identified, and then several other issues. And then a high cost dam will be 7 million plus. It's gonna be a large dam typically with several, if not all, major issues and a lot of other issues as well. So again, I'm just going to go through some examples. All of these are in New Jersey. They're either complete or in process towards completion. I'm going to go from low cost removals to high cost. So just kind of hopefully give you an idea to what to look for in the field. So first we have the Weston Mills Dam. This was removed in 2017 on the Millstone River. So for the dam size, again, I'm looking at size, access, sediment, infrastructure mainly. The dam size, this is a low head dam, about 112 feet long, concrete over old timber crib, and about 5 to 6 feet in height. For access, we had very easy access. We could do staging on publicly owned land, and it required a causeway road construction of about 300 foot. Sediment here, it's a collapsing low head dam with very minimal sediment storage, and also no contamination issues. We did have some infrastructure, but that included a county bridge and that required minimal scour protection. And then we were going to leave some residual dam walls, abutment walls that required a little bit of scour protection. So the overall design here was, basic dam removal, minimal scour protection around bridge and abutment walls. As far as those other issues, costs, there really were none associated with this project. So the cost estimate on this one, again, in New Jersey, Northeastern region, was about $1.5 million total. That's in 2017 dollars. Administrative costs, completely unknown. We have no idea. We didn't track them. Feasibility cost was around $250,000, design $150,000, construction itself around $1 million, and then monitoring $150,000. So next, I'm jumping to an intermediate cost example. This is the Nuns Mill Dam on the South Branch Raritan River, again in New Jersey. This is underway but not complete. So the dam size, the entire dam was 150 feet long. That included a 40-foot concrete gravity spillway that's about 6 foot high, and then a 110-foot concrete and earthen embankment extension off of that. This thing retained about a 3-acre impoundment that's heavily sediment laden. Access here, very easy. Staging can be done on privately owned land, but it will require access road about 300 feet. Sediment is the big issue with this project. We have extensive sediment in the impoundment, with possible but yet unknown if we can reuse or dispose of on site. Infrastructure is kind of a intermediate problem here. We have a downstream county bridge that's going to require some scour protection, and we have some properties that may also require some flooding protection. So the general design is a little bit up in the air, but it'll be probably a basic dam removal. We're going to realign the river to its native channel, and we'll have to do some manipulation of the sediment to either reuse it or dispose of it on site. As far as our other issues, costs, we have possible species of concerns. We'll probably have to do a mussel survey and relocation, which can run 10 to 30,000 in our area. This is located in a historic district, so there will be costs associated with cultural resources. And because of the sediment, it's likely that we'll have some adaptive management contingencies where we might have to do future construction actions dealing with sediment management. Our cost estimate on this one to date is around $2.5 million. Again, administrative cost unknown, feasibility around $270,000, design $250,000, construction up to $2 million. It really depends on how we deal with the sediment, and monitoring again around $150,000. This is the second intermediate cost example. This is the Headgates Dam on the main stem Raritan River. This project's not complete, but we have a lot of information. So dam size, kind of a medium-sized dam. It's a low head, about 250 feet long, 14 feet high. Access is intermediately difficult. We're going to have to build an access road of about a half a mile, but it's on very flat terrain. Sediment on this one is very minimal, so not a big issue. And then we have infrastructure, and this is our big problem on this dam. We know that there's a major 54-inch sewer line located about 90 feet upstream of this dam. So when that dam's removed, the sewer line that is now buried is going to be exposed, and it's at risk of integrity loss. We also have an adjacent historic power canal, and we know we're going to have to modify the intake structures on that power canal to maintain historical and recreational use of the neighboring property. So the overall design here is it's a little bit bigger dam. So we're going to do a dam removal with likely coffer dam installs. We're definitely going to have to relocate that sewer line, rebury it, and do modifications to the power intake structures on the power canal. For other cost issues here that we've identified, this is adjacent to two historic districts. So there's going to be cultural resource costs. And we also think there may be some possible community resistance on this dam. Overall cost estimate is going to be 6.1 million total, including unknown administrative cost, feasibility already been done around 250, design 150,000, construction total around 5.7 million. That includes 1.1 million for the dam and about 2 to 2.3 million each for that sewer line relocation and modifying the power intake structures on the power canal. And then monitoring approximately 150, maybe a little more. Next, I'm moving on to a high cost example. This is the Columbia Dam on the Paulinskill River in New Jersey. This one was removed in 2020. Dam size here, we're actually dealing with two dams on this project. One was just a breached remnant dam that was located downstream. And then we had the Columbia Dam, which is our primary dam, which was intact and pretty large. It was 310 feet long, 18 feet high, and it retained about a 45-acre impoundment. For this, I'm going to actually talk about the design first, because this was a complicated project, and then I'll get into access and sediment. But this project included two dam removals, an extensive impoundment drawdown, extensive scour protection along 3 bridges, one of which was Interstate 80, which is a major bridge that runs from California to New York, and also at 2 upstream bridges, one of which was a historic bridge. We had to do a nature-like fishway install underneath the Interstate 80 bridge because our feasibility showed that that was going to be a really high gradient, high velocity area after dam removal. So it was going to be unable to pass fish. So we had to do a fish passage install. And we also had to do extensive channel restoration and extensive impoundment replanting. So now back to our major factors here. For access for this project, it was actually easy access, easy staging. However, we had multiple access points to contend with to complete all of our work. For sediment, looking at this one, extensive sediment in the former 45-acre impoundment. However, we got a little bit lucky and no offsite disposal of sediment. We were able to dispose of or stabilize it in situ. Infrastructure was another real biggie. As I mentioned on this project, we had extensive at-risk infrastructure with those 3 bridges, which required a lot of scour protection. We also had a multitude of other cost issues on this one. We had mussel surveys and relocation that ran about 30,000. We had cultural resources. We had 3 historic properties on site, including the dam and powerhouse itself. We had a dam ownership cost. We had a FERC lease buyout. We had very high community resistance. So we had to do a lot of outreach on this one. We had monitoring, permit, and otherwise required for this one. We had potential for high adaptive management costs, which we didn't have to do, but there was potential high costs with future modifications that may have occurred. We had impoundment issues. We had a long drawdown process. And again, as I mentioned, we had fish passage issues associated with cost in that high gradient area and having to do modifications for a nature-like fishway. Total costs for this project were around $8+ million. These are lumped a little bit differently than the others, but administrative costs, again, they were quantified for some entities, but not others, but we know that it was greater than 800,000. Feasibility costs, FERC lease buyout, and design, all of that was at least 650, but more because again, not all the costs were accounted for because there was a lot of in-kind work. We had construction and permits, which was around 6.6 million. There was a lot of monitoring, but we don't quite have a dollar amount on that one. And then this is just my last high cost example. Then I'll be done. This is the Warren Glen Dam on the Musconecton River, again in New Jersey. Project not yet complete, but we have a lot of information. So for this one, dam size, very large. It's about 330 feet long and about 38 to 40 foot high. Access, I kind of put this top left picture in here to show you it's kind of remote, at least for New Jersey. It has very difficult access through a gorge area, possible need for a 1+ mile access road through very steep terrain. This holds back for sediment an insane amount of sediment that we're unlikely going to be able to stabilize or reuse or dispose of on site. So it's probably going to have to be called off. Also, some problems with infrastructure. The dam itself is a Class 3 high hazard at risk of sunny day breach. And then we also have downstream infrastructure that will definitely be damaged if we release too much sediment. So design, again, is a little bit up in the air, but it will definitely entail very difficult access, dealing with a very dangerous existing dam structure, extensive sediment disposal offsite probably, long impoundment drawdown, extensive bypass with cofferdams and other installations, and extensive habitat and fish passage restoration. As far as other issues on this one, other costs, likely costs associated with species of concern, namely mussels. It's not historic costs, except for it is adjacent to a wild and scenic reach of the Musconecton, so there will probably be costs associated with dealing with that. Possible community resistance and possible site buyout. We're not sure on that. So this is really probably one of our highest costs in New Jersey. We think this one's going to be around 20 million. Again, administrative costs are kind of question mark, and we're not really great at predicting that. Feasibility minimally 500,000, design very minimally 350,000, and we suspect construction is going to be around 15 million and monitoring 150,000 plus. Thank you.
Hey, Kathy.
Yes.
Both Beths are talking at you. There was a little bit of a discussion in the chat, and it made me wonder, the costs, were these done under federal contract?
It's a mix and match group. So a lot of these that I'm mentioning right now are being conducted under Natural Resource Damages Assessment Restoration Program. So some of them were done by responsible party companies. Others were done by the state. Most of them had some federal monies involved, but no, they weren't under federal contract. Most of them were not under federal contract.
All right, great, thank you.
Okay, I think we're going to hold questions to the end. Kathy, if you want to stop sharing, we're going to put up another poll. This one does not have a link. This one you're going to see in right on your Zoom screen. And then I will give folks a minute. We're really going to want people to participate in the poll. That's what's going to allow me to just take it down. So if you wouldn't mind answering, these are just yes or no. There's no fill in the blank. Couldn't be a lot simpler, but again, important information for trainings. You know, we're trying to figure out, you know, if we create some of these trainings, will folks come, and where are people? Sometimes it's hard for us to know exactly what's happening out there. So trying to get a sense of how many people are out there working on dam removals. Are they things that will come to fruition in, you know, a couple of years or more like 5 years? And importantly, are there people out there who would really like to be doing dam removals but still have some training gaps? Because again, you know, that'll be something that hopefully we can help with. Certainly here in New Jersey, and again, passing it on to national partners like American Rivers will help as well. Right, so we're getting up there. The last 10 of you or so, if you could go ahead and do the poll. Michelle, are you able to pull this down, or do I need to when it's?
I can end it. I was just giving folks a few more minutes.
Yeah, no, I'd give them another 15 seconds or so. And Kathy, if you want to go ahead and stop sharing, and Evan, you can go ahead and put your presentation up. I'll introduce Evan while we're getting these last few results in. Evan Madlinger is the State Resource Conservationist with USDA at RCS. Evan is going to talk about developing a budget. It's kind of different when you work with NRCS because they have cost per practice. So they're going to look at your project and come back and tell you what they'll, give towards each one of those steps that you may be taking. So that process, Evan's going to outline that process and also talk about, if I wind up with funding gaps, then what does that mean for my project and what it's like to actually work by putting a budget together funded by many different entities. So Michelle, did you end that? Okay, all right, so let's take actually just another 10 seconds or so to look at that. So currently managing dam removal, yes, no. Yes, I'd like to, but need some training. It looks like that was 50%. So that's exactly the sort of answers that we're looking for. Interested in project manager training, 58 people. So 89% said yes. Again, fantastic information for me to pass along to American Rivers. Currently working on a dam removal in New Jersey. No, but I'd like to be. That's what we like to hear. Okay, so we can get the results of this, I think, back out if you're interested to let me know. And we can go ahead and take that down. And Evan, you can go ahead and begin the presentation.
All right, thanks, Beth. Yeah, so as Beth kind of said, I'm kind of going to give you guys a presentation on a little different angle here, kind of how NRCS looks at it, and we'll talk about some differences, but I kind of come to the table with money in a way that we look at these projects that's kind of different. So we'll talk about that a little bit, and then I'll dive into a project we actually did, just as a good example to kind of talk through the process of how it may be different here. So did you guys see that advance? I'm assuming so. I'm more of a Teams guy myself here. We tend to use that more here on the government side. Good. So, this is kind of a tough topic. Kathy, Beth Friday, and myself, we kind of talked about some of this. It's kind of hard to wrap your head around this budgeting aspect. And I think we all kind of look at things a little differently. I'm going to kind of give you, like I said, this perspective from NRCS and perspective as a federal biologist, which is the role I was in when we did this particular project I'm going to highlight. And we all can kind of look at these things differently, I guess, depending on what role you're in the removal, whether you're an owner, another agency, a nonprofit, a partner. Again, we've kind of already hit this, but it's worth mentioning. These things, as you saw in Kathy's examples, can vary so greatly from project to project, depending what you're dealing with. And there's almost always going to, or probably I don't even need to say almost, probably say always be hurdles that you don't anticipate as you move through this dam removal, the dam removal projects. And lastly, from my end as NRCS, we provide cost sharing to the landowner, but my big concern is, even though we come to the table with money, our goal is to try to kind of hit like anywhere from a 50 to a 75% of the cost based on our rates. But ultimately, when the project's done and the contractor shows up and wants to get paid, that's going to be on the landowner. So that's something that I'm always really concerned about, is trying to make sure I have real good communication with the landowner throughout the process. And be honest with them if there's some shortfalls or things that just so we're working through, because best laid plans. Beth talked about the budgeting estimator and comparing other projects, but anyone that's been involved with any kind of restoration work knows how much things can change and there's unexpected things can pop up, and I'll talk about that a little bit in my example. If you're not familiar working with NRCS, we're part of USDA, and I've already mentioned we provide cost sharing through programs that are funded under the Farm Bill. And how our process kind of works here, if you have a project that you're interested in, you would come into our office with it and sign up. We generally in New Jersey accept applications for our programs in October, but you can apply at any time. And once that application goes in, we'll come out and make a site visit, or I said site visits, because often these dam removal projects, they're not something you're just going to get a handle on in one quick visit. It's going to take some time multiple visits, and we'll kind of come up with what we think is a project estimate based on our cost share. And I'll show you some of those estimates from the project here in a minute. Once we kind of develop that, your project gets ranked against other projects, and we, most NRCSs across the country rank kind of like projects against each other. So in this case, you'd be ranked out. We're going to get funded here, and then we'll actually go ahead and develop a contract and sign it. And one of the hurdles with NRCS, and why I kind of put this out, is you'll see step 5 here is designs are done. So wait a minute, shouldn't we have a design in the beginning? Yeah, well, that would be great, but in most cases, we're not there because you're not funded yet. We don't have the resources in place. So a lot of times we are kind of building these things off an estimate. And so you'll see step 6 is contracts are modified. And on these dam removals, that happens a lot. We give our best guess, we come up with our cost share, but things are going to change when we get that final design. And that's just one small example here of where things can shift a little bit. And hopefully me as an NRCS employee have built up a good relationship with that landowner. And they trust me, and we can kind of talk these things through as they go. But it is a little tough, and it's not just dam removal. All NRCS projects are basically a lot of times signing before design is done. So again, just kind of communications are key. And then step 7, you see project gets implemented, and then sometimes actually there could be like a 7B where contracts may even get modified again, right? Because we all know even after the designs, there's often things that change or you don't foresee. And so then sometimes we'll modify our contracts again. Maybe we get you some more costs for some items, or maybe some things were not as needed as we thought. So those kind of things happen. And lastly, everybody's favorite part, we'll make a payment to the participant based on our cost share. So I'm going to talk to you. This is probably what you consider, definitely would consider on kind of that small end of Kathy's scale there that she had laying out size of projects. But this was a Burnt Mills Dam. This is on the Lamington River, and this was a great project. Raritan Headwaters was the landowner on this, good nonprofit in New Jersey, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and we'll talk about this more when we get into partners here, was vital with NRCS to kind of making this project happen. You can see it's a remnant dam. It had blown out there kind of on the west side. The flow of the river is going south to north there in this picture. Again, Lamington River, if you know New Jersey, this is on the border of Bedminster and Branchburg here. And this project's out. We got this project completed back in October of 2019. Just to help with the story here a little bit, this is what the dam looked like. You can see it's concrete there. And if you notice, you can see those kind of rounded cobbles in the bottom of the dam, and we'll get back to that in a second, why that's relevant. But so this is kind of what the dam looked like. There was a lot of resource concerns. You would say, well, it's blown out. There's already fish passage there. Well, yeah, to an extent, but there are a lot of other issues on site that were concerning. You can see where it constricted flow and really eroded out this bank. And I don't, not to get real into it, but extensive erosion along the bend here. A bunch of collection of sediment kind of behind it. This whole backwater area was pretty rough. And really, back when I first went, the historic channel, it had, maybe I'll just show you real quick. So the historic channel would have been straight over the dam and under the bridge to the right of the island there. And you see the main flow, because of the dam, was kind of more to the left there. So we wanted to reorient that stream flow, which I'll show you in a minute here. So from those initial site visits and kind of just getting a feel for the site as we got into the process here, we knew some things already. We knew that there was, we wanted to take this dam out. We knew that there was going to need to be some bank work. We knew we wanted to do some in-stream habitat work. We knew we were dealing with some sediment. From my end of NRCS, just to give you a little peek behind the curtain of some things I had to deal with, we realized that there was two programs in play here. We actually had an easement on one side of the project, and the rest of it was going to be under equip. So I had to do some juggling. Our cost sharing through our wetland easement program is 100%, so we pay 100% off the bills, where our equip program was 75% or 60, 75% cost sharing. So I even within the same project had to juggle a little bit, our cost sharing. We knew partners would be interested. We got U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service involved with this, which was a huge help. And we'll get into that a little bit. And then we knew we were going to deal with some cultural resources. The Burnt Mills Dam was named Burnt Mills because there was, local lore that the British burned that mill during the Revolution. So we knew we were going to be dealing with some cultural resources there. You don't ever do these projects without permitting, which Kathy had kind of filled you guys in. That's something that takes a little bit of time. And lastly, this was a high profile site, well-known site by the public, so we had a lot of public attention on it. So again, I just threw this map up real quick. So this was like the EQIP portion of the project I was going to use. We could use our EQIP program on, but our easement program, that kind of notch there, kind of on the west side there that you see out of the river, that's where our easement overlaps. So just internally, again, just a little peek behind the curtain. That's what I had to juggle with was, what parts of the project were being funded in the easement, what parts were being funded in the other project. And of course, that all kind of built into budgeting. And I did just kind of throw these up real quick. These are some of the initial estimates that we worked up for this project. And as Beth said, you can see we kind of have our NRCS conservation practices on the left, so stream habitat improvement, aquatic organism passage, kind of the components that we're looking to pay for, what the amounts were, and then what the payment rate was and what that was going to mean for this project. So again, the nice part is I knew going into this project, based on what we were thinking, that I was going to have $115,320 to kind of work with as a starting point for EQIP portion. The wetland easement portion, kind of similar here. We knew we could pay 100% off the bills, but we kind of gave it an estimate on that portion that we're going to need about $25,000. And so you can see this is on the smaller end of those projects. We were talking about millions when Kathy was presenting, but we did actually get this one out for probably more like 160 or 170. $1,000, but we'll talk about some other things with that too. So here's our kind of final one sheet of our final design. We had some other sheets. We had some more detailed stream habitat improvement, but just to give you an idea of what we're doing there, we were going to channel block off that left kind of channel there and reestablish the main channel where it was historically. We could tell from photos, we're going to shave back that island a little bit, put some material up in the front, get some root wads. In there, we had some deflectors, might be a little hard to see, or might not even, I guess it's on there. And again, there's some other stuff too, something to get into with some other sheets, but just to kind of give you an idea. And you may notice here that this is an NRCS project, but you'll notice that there's a Fish and Wildlife logo down at the bottom there. And so when we talk about partners, NRCS, we do have our own engineering staff, but it's not very big, and they have a lot of agronomic projects.
Squares up with some.
They were working on. So anyway, in this particular case, one of the huge things that U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service helped with is their fish passage engineer actually did this design. So that's just one note, right? When I said this project was maybe 160, 170 in the end, that engineering was essentially free to the landowner, but somebody paid for that. Tax dollars paid for that, engineer for U.S. Fish and Wildlife to do that. So in this particular project, that's probably a cost that we're not accounting for here. Kind of what Kathy was with administrative costs. So here's something we didn't know about, and you've heard this already, were mussels, right? So these are just common elliptia that were on site, actually, the project was going on. But we had some T&E species in this area too, that, and just to kind of show you how these things go, when we started this project in 2017, in New Jersey, we have a very good layer Division of Fish and Wildlife Service puts out called the Landscape Project. It gives you a good idea about what species are in the area. Well, in 17, they didn't really have a good layer at the time for aquatic habitat. So when we looked at the landscape project, we didn't get any hits for mussels. And we kind of made the assumption that we might be okay here when it comes to mussels. Well, flash forward to when the project was actually getting designed, new layer, we tripped up, we realized we had some mussels here. And not only that, they had done some extensive monitoring work for mussels here. So this turned out to be a major, thing that we had to work with on this project. To the point where Division of Fish and Wildlife wasn't even sure they were going to let us do this project. It took, several sit-down meetings, a lot of back and forth, kind of some modifications of the project. We had to really minimize our stream habitat work that we're going to do upstream and downstream. Really had some implications with sediment and what was going to happen with the sediment that was accumulated there and how that was going to get treated. And so this is where, U.S. Fish and Wildlife came in huge, because I was able to sit at the table, not just with myself, and NRCS folks, but we had U.S. Fish and Wildlife there. And between the two of us, two federal agencies were really able to gain the confidence of Jersey Fish and Wildlife and gain their support for this project. So that was huge. But this probably added, I was looking at the numbers before, this is about $12,000 of a mussel survey You know, they ended up surveying for mussels and then coming up with some reports and then actually translocating or relocating some of the mussels. So that was an expense that nobody was counting on. Now, fortunately, with Raritan Headwaters working with NRCS, this was a cost that we were able to pick up that they didn't have to bear the burden of. And actually, we didn't even pick it up fully. Again, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service stepped up and helped us split that cost for this project. So just an example of one of these things that kind of tends to pop up. Another thing was the cultural resources. Now, we knew going into it that this was already going to be something that could pop up here. And it was. I mean, it was definitely an historic site. We ended up having to do you know, phase 1 and phase 1A and phase 1B on this. We had an archaeologist on site. This was actually, you know, his staff there, his rod that he was taking some pictures of the timber. We did find timbers kind of throughout the site. And so again, good for the landowner being a federal agency and that we have to address these things. NRCS was able to cover the cost of the cultural resource aspect of this. And I didn't have the numbers. I'm not in my office as much as a lot of us are these days. I had it in the file. I didn't get a chance to get for this, but I would, from memory serves me right, this was about $25,000, $30,000 to do all this cultural resource for this as well. So another thing that popped up that really isn't even part of the nuts and bolts of the project. Here's another thing that popped up. So if you remember, I told you that when we looked at the dam, you guys probably all saw plain as day that there were some cobbles in the base of the dam there. So we all were sure, 100% confident that this was, you know, timber cribbed, concrete cap dam, much like we see in New Jersey. And man, we were just going to break through that concrete and this whole thing was just going to crumble when we got into the cobbles. Well, guess what? Nope, solid concrete dam, right? So fortunately, this thing was in pretty rough shape and it did break apart a lot easier than it started looking like in the beginning. But I started sweating some bullets here too, because this was starting to look like it was going to take a lot more time to take this dam out than we originally thought. And, you know, having the machinery on site and the time and the labor, you know, I was starting to get a little nervous. This could add up quickly. But again, it did actually end up coming out relatively quickly. But again, one of those things that all these experts on site, myself included, looking at these things, and you know, you didn't really know until we got into it that it wasn't exactly what we thought it was. This is a picture of them building the channel block. And what I really want to kind of call your attention to here is you can see the rock here in the front foreground here, the picture, and then in the background, you might see some more rock over there to the left and to the right. And that's kind of a big thing. Rock is something that sometimes keeps me up at night on these projects. There's so many factors that can affect getting rock, and you almost always, you know, need rock, whether it's a dam removal or even a stream project, you know, some restoration. You know, we really strive to use more natural rock that would be more similar to the site. And where are you going to get that? Are you going to buy that from a quarry? You know, sometimes in New Jersey, we can get this rock for free if you have good connections on a construction site, but you still have to truck it there. And trucking's expensive. These big rocks tend to beat up the trucks. You can't fit a lot on a load. So in this particular site, I would say we actually did pretty good. We got the rock for free, but we were paying about $900 for a load of rock. And that was about 25 tons per roll off that they had there for the rock. I think we ended up with 20 loads of rock. And then I'm trying to figure out this rock and the cost based on my cost share, you know, so you can see just one example there. You know, we're cost sharing this at deflector rock greater than 80 tons for $3,000. So that's some of the math that even with me with NRCS, I'm trying to juggle to figure out, you know, how our numbers are going to work against what the actual numbers are. And, you know, the hard thing, and I just want to point this out, you know, you all know about supply chain issues and fuel and trucking right now in the situation, and those are all going up. Continue to go up. I doubt you'll get $900 load right now. And again, that was free. You know, we weren't buying that from the quarry. So definitely something that you need to think about in these projects, because almost all of them need some element of large rock to help stabilize things and create riffles and do those kind of things. So I want to point that out. And I would also add that you never have enough rock. You think you do, you know, I don't care, best laid plans, best designs ever, you know, you always can use a little bit more rock than what you have. It's just the nature of the beast here. So how do we end up? So in this particular project, We did pretty well in the end, thankfully, but the dam ended up being a few less cubic yards. So if you saw back on my estimate, we kind of had to come up with an estimate of cubic yards. We had 550 cubic yards of concrete that we were going to remove, and it ended up being about 50 or 75 yards less than that. So that affects my cost share. I can't pay for cubic yards that didn't exist. And the reason how that happened was we thought that it might be, the dam might be tied in deeper than it was, but it turned out it really was just kind of sitting on top of the bedrock there. I already mentioned more rock than we thought, and that could be expensive. That we did make out, we were able to juggle some things. We were able to make out on some of the habitat work that we were doing. We dug some vernal pools in the floodplain, too much to get into here. We were able to do that quickly based on machines on site, so we could make out on some of the cost sharing on some other items, which is another thing with NRCS we try to balance out based on our cost rates. And we were able to add in some additional funding because because of some of that more rock and stuff. So at the end of the day, the landowner was within that kind of 25% on their end that we strive for. So that was really good. Kind of last couple slides here, but time is money. You've heard this already. Just on this little dam site, multiple site visits. We had to do public meetings, pre-construction meetings. We had 2 kind of stakeholder partner meetings. We had a lot of time that went into this mussel issue, working through that. Permitting application, putting those together. And a huge one was turbidity monitoring. The mussels triggered us to pay a lot of attention to the turbidity that we were releasing downstream. Thankfully, and kind of by dumb luck, our landowner was Rare Headwaters, who does water quality monitoring. So that worked out perfect. They had volunteers come out and their own staff come out and do their turbidity monitoring. And they were there pretty much throughout the project. They had to be taking multiple readings a day. So that would have been a big expense if it wasn't for the fact that Rare Headwaters could help us with that. But at the end of the day, it is all worth it. And if you think back to those first pictures that I showed you, I mean, this is what it looks like today. You see the channel block, this nice riffle, stabilization work, kind of looking back on it the other way. So we definitely don't want to scare you with all this information because, it definitely is worth it in the end. But, I hope we're laying out, and I know you guys have heard this, it's a lot of work to make these projects happen. And thankfully, the reward is as great as it is. So when these dams do come out, you feel like you accomplished something and it was worth your effort, but it is a lot of effort and a lot of juggling. So anyway, that's all I got.
Thanks very much, Evan. We're right at time. Evan, there is a question for you. I'm gonna go back and look at it. If folks can stay on, we'll answer these questions. It was about ranking, how the NRCS ranks. Oh, it looks like Betsy answered that question. Okay.
Yeah, my question was answered.
And Keith's question is answered. Anyone else have questions for folks? I realize we're at time. Every time I think, I planned it out, we always wind up. I'm always worried that we're not going to have enough material. And I see Betsy put a link in the chat as well for more info on the NRCS. Okay, someone has their hand up. You want to go ahead and unmute yourself? I think we can.
Yeah, thank you. This is Jonathan Kusa with Interfluve. Just wanted to say really great presentation. Appreciate the information that's being provided to team members that are looking to do dam removals. I would just say, from our perspective, doing this work all over is, context is key. I think you hit on that in terms of identifying costs, making sure that you understand where in space the dam is relative to issues around it. But also, I was going to suggest, I can speak for Interfluve. I'm sure I can speak for the other consultants on the phone, but use us for that conceptual level costing as well. We are happy to do that sort of work. That's marketing for us. That's pro bono work we do. Most of us do this as a passion and a mission the same way you do. And so we enjoy just putting projects out there that are potentially going to be removed by us, by federal partners, by nonprofits, by state agencies. So we are happy to engage at that base level to help you understand what your costs may be. And so absolutely wanted to advocate for use of your consulting community, at that preliminary stage, and have us join you out in the field and be poking around and looking at what the site might hold and help try to refine those costs, because the better we can be upfront, the more likely we can then have appropriate targets to fundraise for and actually get these out of the landscape. So thanks for having us on, but really appreciate all the information being shared.
Thanks very much, Jonathan. And I was almost going to ask the consultants if if I have asked you a question, go ahead and stick your hand up. But I think it'd be easier to say if I haven't asked you a question for pro bono advice, put your hand up, because we do in the nonprofit sector absolutely rely on the kindness of the professionals who we do know are passionate about this work as well. I will tell you that sometimes we're precluded from asking certain questions at certain phases of the project if we then want you to go ahead and bid on a project. So sometimes that constraint comes in, but thanks to all of the consultants that have, who have been there, and we do consider you partners as well on these jobs. Any other question? You can go ahead and unmute yourself, because I think we're kind of at that stage now where it's safe to just unmute and ask. Okay, I thank you guys for staying on. We're 5 minutes over, so please, feel free to jump off or to stay on if you have a question.
Hey, Beth, this is Beth Friday with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in the Northeast region. I just want to add, Kathy talked about it being very difficult to capture the administrative costs. Our region has a fish passage engineer. They work along with the engineer who's designing the dam removal to ensure that whatever your target anadromous fish is, that it can pass whatever structure that's going to replace the dam, like a grade control structure. And so, there's tons of that administrative support coming from NRCS, from the Fish and Wildlife Service, from the NGOs like TNC that's helping. But I just want to let folks know that there might be, like, our region has a fish passage engineer that's available to help, and they may have some resources like that available to them as well.
Okay, and I did ask, I actually asked Eric Schrading a few weeks ago whether or not, folks up in Hadley would do a training, because we see engineering firms wanting that expertise. And the traditional place that folks would get that was down at NCTC at the National Conservation Training Center. But with that, at least 1 year off the, it was always a waiting list to get in there. And now with COVID, it's not the most efficient way to get folks trained. So, any training like that would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, that would be really useful, because their goal is not to displace the work of the engineers, it's to complement what they're already doing.
Yeah. I saw someone ask if we could provide our slide decks versus just the recording. I don't know. I can't speak for others. I don't know if that's okay. I mean, the recording is there. You can always just step through the recording. Okay, we'll keep it at that. It's a little slightly more cumbersome, but the information is there. Any other questions? Okay, I think we'll go ahead. Oh, okay, just a thank you. You're welcome. So, all right. Thanks everyone for joining. I know it's hard to fit an hour in, and I appreciate it. We hope that it's useful. Thanks.
Thanks, Beth.
And thanks
Thanks,
to our
Beth.
presenters. Thank you guys very much. It's hard to fit that into your day, Kathy, Evan, and Beth. I appreciate it very much.